Today I will be reading chapter 1 of The Art of Walk. 1. Listening to your life. The call to something old, not new. Before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am. Parker Palmer. You don't just know what your calling is, you must listen for clues along the way, discovering what your life can tell you. Awareness comes with practice. The halls of Emory Hospital were particularly busy that day as Jody Nolan navigated the crowds to locate her friend's room. She brushed past people visiting their loved ones, and a queasy thought came to her. How could something so terrible be happening to Larry? Larry Elliott had recently decided to reprioritize his life, selling his successful insurance business to serve hurting children in the world. It began with serving alongside with his wife, Bev, as house parents at a children's home in Alabama, but had led to a leadership position at another children's home outside of Atlanta. He was changing gears in what he thought would be the second half of his life, but he had much less time than he realized. Larry and Bev decided to take their family on a long-awaited vacation to Europe. This was a chance to spend some quality time together and reconnect with their kids. It was a trip everyone was looking forward to. The pain started on the flight to Italy, beginning with a throbbing sensation between Larry's temples. In Florence, a CAT scan revealed a mess in his brain, and the family was forced to end the vacation prematurely. On the flight home, the pilot had to fly at a lower altitude to minimize the amount of pressure in Larry's head. The next morning, he was scheduled to go into surgery. At 48 years old, Larry was battling a brain tumor. His room wasn't that difficult to find, as Jody later recalled in her book. It was the one where people overflow into the hallway. There was not enough space to fit all the friends he had accumulated in his lifetime. And in spite of the pain, Larry did his best to comfort his visitors. There was a sense of urgency in his demeanor that day. At one point, he asked his wife if she brought a pen and paper, something that seemed odd to Jody. Later she asked Bev what was that about, and Bev explained that Larry wanted to write a letter to each of their children before going into surgery. He didn't know if he would make it out of alive there, and wanted to express his love, affirming what was so unique and special about each of his children. Larry lived another 9 months before ultimately losing his life to cancer. That same year, Jody lost 2 other friends who were both in their 40s and passed away without warning. The deaths came as a shock to everyone. As Jody watched 3 grieving families, she thought of the comfort Larry's had provided his family. She heard for the children, those who knew unquestionably of their parents' love, but desperately missed the reassurance and security that their physical presence provided. She couldn't stop thinking of the letter he wrote and the difference it had made. Jody started sharing Larry's story with others. Don't you think this is something we should all do for the people we love? She would say, trying to drum up interest, and many would respond, yes, but I'm not a writer, or yes, but I have no idea where to begin. One way of knowing our gifting, Jody told me, is something that seems easy to us doesn't seem easy to others. I kept thinking, how hard could it be? Maybe I could help people do this. What seems so hard for so many people seemed easy to me. She eventually relented to that prompting. Jody established Leave Nothing Unsaid, a program and a book that helps people of all ages write letters to their loved ones. After Larry's death, she had been inspired, but the idea didn't become reality. Until she decided to act, she kept thinking someone should do something. Finally, she realized that someone was her. At 58 years old, Jody Nolan is beginning to understand how her life has been converging for decades on this very moment. She is doing what she was born to do. And although the circumstances that have been hard, even painful, she's learned an important lesson. All along, her life was teaching her something, even in the pain. And if she hadn't paid attention, she might have just missed it. Happiness is overrated. There are two stories we hear when it comes to pursuing a dream. First is the tale of the self-made man or woman. In this story, we see a driven individual overcoming adversity and defying the odds to achieve success. Many of us have believed this is the only way to achieve anything. Through sheer tenacity, the process is simple. Set a goal, work hard, and achieve your objectives. You can be anything you want, do anything you want. All you have to do is work hard. You are in complete control of your destiny, but things are not always so simple. In the film The Secret of My Success, Michael J. Fox played a young upstart named Brantley who is trying to get ahead in the corporate world. After continual rejection, he finally explodes in another failed job interview, saying, "Everywhere I've been today, there's always been something wrong. Too young, too old, too short, too tall. Whatever the exception is, I can fix it. I can be older, I can be taller, I can be anything." Like many people, Bentley believed that if he put his mind to it, he could accomplish anything. In the end, though, he realized the secret of success is that sometimes getting everything you want doesn't always make you happy. The second story is the opposite of the first. Instead of the self-made path, you have a determined one. Whatever will be, will be. Life happens in spite of what we want. You have no control over anything. And in the end, you will look back on your life and understand there could have been no other way. But where is the adventure in that? In having everything scripted out for you? And what of the countless stories of those on their deathbeds confessing regret? Even when we talk in terms of destiny and fate, we want to believe we have some control over our lives. There must be another way. The first part says you can be whatever you want. The second says you have no choice. But perhaps there is a third way. What if there was more to your purpose than getting what you wanted? What if there were some things you couldn't control, but how you reacted to those situations made a difference? Is there a purpose to your life? Or are we all just bouncing around in a chaotic universe? Everyone from religious scholars to scientists and career counselors has pondered these questions. So let's look at them pragmatically. Here's what we know. A lot of people are unhappy with their jobs, where they spend a significant amount of time. A recent poll found that only 13% of the world's workers are engaged in their jobs. The other 87% feel disconnected from work and more frustrated than fulfilled. These numbers shouldn't come as a surprise. When a friend says she hates her job or a family member talks badly about his boss, we aren't shocked. This is acceptable behavior. We've been conditioned to think of work as drudgery, a chore you endure in exchange for a paycheck. And this is a problem. When you are stuck fulfilling an obligation instead of chasing a dream, you aren't your best self. We all know that. This is why we find more and more people moving from one occupation to the next. They're doing their best to be happy, but failing miserably. Most of us have done this at some point, quitting one thing for the promise of something better. And we were disappointed to find that the next job or relationship held the same complications as the one we were escaping. But maybe we're going about this all wrong. Maybe the worst way to be happy is to try to be happy. The work of acclaimed Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl supports this idea. A Holocaust survivor, Frankl had intimate experience with suffering, and it taught him an important lesson. Human beings, he argued, are not hardwired for seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. They want meaning. In spite of what we say, we don't want happiness. It's simply not enough to satisfy our deepest longings. We're looking for something more, something transcendent, a reason to be happy. As part of his life-saving therapy with suicidal patients and his own experience in a Nazi concentration camp, Frankl learned there are three things that give meaning to life. First, a project. Second, a significant relationship. And third, a redemptive view of suffering. He realized that if people, even in the bleakest of circumstances, have a job to do, something to return to tomorrow, then they have a reason to live another day. For Frankl, the book manuscript he had been working on before entering the camp and the hope of seeing his wife were what kept him alive. And in time, he was able to see the purpose in his pain, because he had work to do. Someone who he believed was waiting for him, and a certain attitude towards suffering. He survived it when others did not. And his memoir, Man's Search for Meaning, became one of the most popular books of the 20th century, affecting millions of lives. What we often don't realize is that making our story about us, even about our pain, is the wrong approach. Dwelling on the past or fixating on the future won't help you find fulfillment. The way you beat a feeling of purposelessness, according to Frankl, isn't to focus on the problem. It's to find a better distraction, which is a roundabout way of saying you have to stop trying to be happy. But doesn't everyone want to be happy? Maybe not. Life is too short to do what doesn't matter, to waste your time on things that don't amount to much. What we all want is to know our time on earth has some meaning. We can distract ourselves with pleasure for only so long, before beginning to wonder what the point is. This means if we want true satisfaction, we have to rise above the pettiness of our own desires and do what is required of us. A calling comes when we embrace the pain, not avoid it. Tragedies, unfortunately, are inevitable. Bad things happen to good people, whether we want them to or not. What determines our destiny, though, is not how successful we are at dodging hardship, but what we do when it comes. Pain and suffering, though intimidating obstacles, are not strong enough to keep us from our purpose. In fact, they can sometimes be the very catalysts for such discoveries. That's the lesson Jody Nolan learned from her friend Larry, and what she almost forgot when her own husband was on his deathbed. The good kind of fear. Fear is a powerful deterrent, but it can also be an effective motivator. The fear of failure, rejection, can be unhealthy and irrational, but fear of not telling your loved ones how much you care is important. So not all fear is bad. Some people, though, let fear run their lives. They avoid risk, hoping to minimize the chances of failure, and in fact, move in the opposite direction of a calling. The trick is to know when to listen to your fear and when not to. In 2009, Mike Nolan, Jody's husband, was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. Jody started searching the internet for what she could learn about his prognosis. Realizing he has little time left to live, she began to prepare for the inevitable. Mike, however, had other ideas. His way of coping was to deny the imminence of death. In Jody's words, he hunkered down and refused to acknowledge reality. He didn't read about his condition, didn't ask the doctors any questions, and continued with life as usual, except, of course, for the regular chemotherapy and radiation treatments. In the midst of all that, she told me, he was concerned about his clients and whether it was time to execute a buy-sell agreement on his business. Doing that meant he was accepting his certain death sentence. The day the agreement was executed, his mind began to fog. Listening to Jody relate the story over the phone, years after the fact, I could still hear the pain in her voice. I could feel the urgency. She pleaded with Mike to write letters to his children, a gesture she had seen make a dramatic impact in Larry's family. In fact, so moved by her friend's gesture, she had begun helping others to do the same by teaching a letter-writing workshop that empowered people to share words of affirmation with their loved ones. She wanted her family to receive the same comfort she had provided for strangers, but her husband resisted. He didn't believe the cancer was that serious, and after weeks of trying to persuade him, even resorting to write the letters for him, Jody finally gave up. Deciding to comfort her husband with whatever time they had left, the cancer killed Mike quickly. Within 3 months of the diagnosis, he was gone, never having started a single letter. After the funeral, his daughter Nancy asked Jody if he had written any letters like the ones her stepmom had helped others write. Jody was devastated. She felt like a failure. And in spite of her encouragement and occasional nagging, none of it had worked. She knew the power of letter writing, the impact a few words of encouragement could make. But there were no letters for Nancy, no words of affirmation from her now deceased father. And there never would be. After Mike's death, Jody wondered whether or not she could continue the letter writing workshops. My immediate conclusion was that I should abandon this dream. She called in her book, "How could I advise others to do this when I had failed so miserably in my own home?" She doubted if this was something she was called to. After all, I really thought I had misunderstood. Jody gave away the workbooks she had made, keeping only one as a keepsake, and she let the grieving begin. A year later, a man called her, looking for a copy of the workbooks she used to have. His wife's best friend was dying of breast cancer and wanted to write a letter to her 2 daughters. She was desperate, but didn't know where to begin or what to say. Jody explained she wasn't doing the workshops anymore, but sent the woman her one remaining workbook. Her death was so imminent, she wrote, that a courier was sent to pick up the workbook. Several weeks later, Jody received a thank you note because her workbook had helped the dying mother express her love for her daughters in writing. She was able to spend the last few weeks of her life in peace. Jody wept. All this time, she had been afraid of failing, of trying and not succeeding. But now she understood what was really at stake. She knew that the thing she had to fear the most was failing to answer this calling she had received, no matter how much it hurt. "I would rather go for it and fail than not try," she said. What we learn from fairy tales. At the beginning of every story, we see something that looks like a normal life, long before the protagonist slays the dragon or embarks on a quest. We see her in some unexpected place, dreaming of something more. In Beauty and the Beast, my personal favorite Disney classic, Belle sings of wanting more than this provision life. In Star Wars, Luke can't wait to escape the burden of a farmer's life. And in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy sings about life somewhere over the rainbow. Our lives are haunted by the ghosts of what might have been. It's easy to dismiss such people as dreamers or even downright crazy. But are they really? Before a chain of events sets the hero on course to his destiny, there is a sense that there should be more to his life, to their life. You may be feeling it right now. At an important moment, everything makes sense, as it did for Eric Miller when he realized the clock wasn't ticking away on his son's life any faster than his own, and when Jody Nolan saw how significant a letter from a loved one could be. This is what storytellers call the inciting incident. The moment when everything changes, the tale of an average person living an average life becomes one of mythic proportions. But something must occur for this to take place. The person must enter the story, either by choice or because she's forced into it. Belle goes to find her father. Luke leaves home with Obi-Wan. Dorothy gets swept up in a tornado. In any great narrative, there is a moment when a character must decide to become more than a bystander. It's an important moment that always seems to happen in the mind before it unfolds in real life. This choice, though, is always preceded by something deeper, a nagging feeling that there must be more. This is why people are called to some great task. They know it. Immediately they recognize the prompting to step up and do something significant, because they have been waiting for it. Before the call comes, we must possess some sense that awakens us to our purpose. Awareness, then, is what prepares us for the call. Before you know what your calling is, you must believe you are called to something. It doesn't matter if you know what. In order to cultivate awareness, you must be willing to act, to step out and see what happens. And once you are convinced that purpose will not find you, that you will have to go in search of it, you're ready. Until you make this choice, though, you will feel frustrated, seeing people succeed and chalking it up to luck or some unfair advantage, and in doing this, you will deceive yourself. The truth is, some people do get lucky, and others have been born into special privilege. But what are those things to you? You are still called. A calling may be many things, but it is not fair. Still, you must answer it. Before you begin your life's walk, you need to prepare. Chances come to us all, but only those who are ready recognize them. You don't need some big plan. You just need to be a little dissatisfied. You need to have some vague premonition that the world is not completely right. That's what awareness is, a sense that something more is possible. You don't need a lucky break or a golden opportunity. You don't even need to just know. What you need is the desire and the willingness to begin. Only then you can dedicate yourself to the work that is required of you. And only then you will know what is what. Without awareness, you won't be able to recognize the opportunities that come. And they always come to those with open eyes. The wrong kind of fear. I don't have a dream. It was the fear that haunted my thoughts that day. Lingering in my mind, I sank down deep in my seat. Surrounded by 100 pairs of hopeful eyes, we were all there, gathered in that multi-purpose room, which was doubling as a conference center that day, for the same reason: to pursue a dream, to find the thing our hearts had been searching for. Some of us wanted to be novelists, others aspired to start our own ad agencies or travel to South America to make a documentary. Each dream represented a unique and beautiful dream, some special skill in the world needed. The passion in that room was infectious, which only reinforced the feeling that I did not deserve to be there. What's your dream? Was the opening obligatory question? And we all did our best to respond in kind. It was even something we had to inscribe on our name tags. I think mine said something profound and nondescript, like creative catalyst. In other words, I didn't know. I had no idea what my dream was or what I was doing there. When people asked what I wanted to do with my life, I used big, fancy words and complicated phrases that meant little to me, but caused people's eyes to glaze over just enough so that they were too intimidated to ask any follow-up questions, which was precisely my intent. I wanted to be a storytelling shopper, I told a guy carrying around an iPad. He nodded. The fear of following up obvious in his eyes. Mission accomplished. A few times during the conference, I talked about my new day job, but that felt boring and original. I was sure my dream was something new and interesting, something out there that I'd never done before, but would recognize as soon as it appeared on the horizon. At some point during the conference, it would walk up to me and say hello, greeting me with a smile, and we would start the rest of my life together. Every time I answered another question, I felt like I was betraying myself, that people were slowly seeing through the facade and beginning to feel sorry for me. Me, the helpless wanderer who was at a dream conference and didn't have a dream, the guy with no vision for the future, just a fancy name tag. And then, just as I was getting ready to excuse myself from my table and sneak out the back exit, the opening speaker stepped up to the podium with a few short words. He shattered my illusion. "Some of you are here, don't know what your dream is," he said. "In fact, most of you don't." I looked around to see dozens of heads nodding slowly in unison. Apprehensively, I did the same, a little worried who was watching me, but eventually letting go and feeling the freedom that came with admitting I didn't know what I was doing. "But the truth is," he continued, "you do know what your dream is. You are just afraid to admit it." My heart sank. As soon as he spoke those words, one word popped into my mind: writer. Now I was no longer afraid of failing. I was afraid of not trying. What if you don't know what you're supposed to do? What if you have no idea what your passion is? These are the questions we ask when trying to figure out what we should do with our lives. And they are good questions. I've asked them myself. But they are not the right questions. When we say we don't know what to do, what we are really doing is asking something deeper. What we want to know is this: Can you promise me I won't fail? And the answer is no, of course. Of course not. Nobody can promise that. Most people waste the best years of their life waiting for an adventure to come to them instead of going out and finding one. They succumb to the status quo and dream of life being different someday. Plagued with indecision, they wait, unsure of the right path to follow. And as they wait, they miss an opportunity to live. The only smart choice is to move, to not hold out for a better time and choose a direction now. Yes, you could fail, but we all know what happens when we don't try. Nothing. Suddenly there will be bumps on the road, even wrong turns, but at least you will be moving. We often think of a calling as something that comes to us, an epiphany that arrives when we least expect it. But the truth is, in some way, it's already come. You already have some sense of what you're supposed to do with your life, even if you aren't sure what it is. The trick is to find your vocation hidden in your life. That's what I learned the moment I started thinking of myself as a writer. I went looking for answers and found that some of them were already in me. We all want to just know what we're supposed to do with our lives, for our purpose to be spelled out for us. But that's not how a calling works. It's never clear and hardly ever obvious, especially when you're starting out. But when you start to take those first steps, when you commit to some course of action, you begin to see what was there all along. Most of us have some sneaking suspicion that there must be more to life than this. We understand where we each have a part to play in a bigger story, even if we aren't sure what it is. We know there's something. Those lucky few who find their callings testify to this. They knew there were a purpose out there. There was a purpose out there, and they were determined to find it. The way they did this was by taking the first step, by overcoming the myth that you just know, and deciding to act anyway. And they learned, as you might, an important lesson. Clarity comes with action. At a certain point, you must acknowledge this nudge, a hint of whisper that says life has been holding out on you. We all have some understanding of what we're supposed to do with our lives. We may not realize it, or perhaps we lost it, but it's there, waiting to be uncovered. What we need then is not a map, but a shovel, a set of tools to start digging. I used to think a calling was something you just knew you had, and if you didn't know, then you weren't called. But I have come to understand that's not the case at all. A calling is what you have when you look back at your life and make sense of what it's been trying to teach you all along. What would you do if you could do anything? Everyone has an answer to that question. You might spend all day with the kids or travel the world, or finally write that book. You might dedicate some serious time to a business idea, or perhaps, with the right resources, buy a new camera to take photos all day at the park. Or maybe you just sit back and sip coffee on the porch with your spouse, embracing all the little things in life. If you pry hard enough, everyone has an answer to this question, and that's an important clue. The problem is, so few of our lives look anything like what we want them to be. What prevents us from living the life we long for is fear. We fear the unknown and what we might lose, our security, our reputation, our lives. This is what keeps us from our life's walk, and what numbs our awareness to the core: mystery. We are afraid of what we don't know, but the truth is, you will never have clarity. As Mother Teresa once said, you will only ever have trust, fear, indecision, not knowing. These are the obstacles that keep you from moving forward, and they never go away. But if you are going to find what you were meant to do, you will have to act anyway. What I am trying to say here is that a calling takes work. Finding yours will require a fear-facing journey that will last a lifetime. And where does it begin? With awareness, with discovering what your life is already saying to you. And as you attempt to uncover this mystery, consider one more question, a much more constructive one. What happens if you don't do this? That's what should really scare you. That's what should really scare you. Your life is speaking. Many people wander through life, unaware of their purpose, blindly following the whims of the world. To them, those who reach their potential seem to possess an extraordinary gift. But what if pursuing your calling wasn't a luxury reserved for the elite? What if it was required to live life, fully alive? Where would you start? Listen to your life. That's 𝕮𝖆𝖕𝖙 advice. An author who spent part of his life as a school teacher and another part as a minister. He observed that finding your vocation is less about grand moments of discovery and more about a habit of awareness. See it for the fathomless mystery it is, he wrote. In the burden of pain and pain of it, no less than in the excitement and gladness, touch, taste, smell, your way to the holy and hidden heart of it. Because in the last analysis of all are key moments. What 𝕮𝖆𝖕𝖙 was saying is that awareness doesn't just happen, it must be cultivated. If you pay attention to your life, the lessons it can teach you, you won't feel so lost. Your story will seem less like a mini-series of disjointed events and more like a beautifully complex narrative unfolding before you. You will understand each setback, inconvenience, and frustration as something more than what it appears to be. And perhaps, as you listen to it, your life will speak. It may call to you in the early morning or late at night and tell you what you are meant to do with your gifts, your passions, and your abilities. This voice might help you make sense of what has happened to you. It may even give you advice, guidance. Or it might unravel a whole new thread or theme you never before considered. The point isn't necessarily what the voice says. That's important, of course, but it's beyond your control. The point is to listen. In a world full of distractions, this is what we are inclined not to do. We would rather buy a book, sign up for a seminar, or attend a conference to instruct us. Take this step, follow that program, adhere to these 6 principles. But such experiences are poor substitutes for the fathomless mystery of life. As 𝕮𝖆𝖕𝖙 put it, we have been raised to believe that anything is possible, that our potential is unlimited, and that we are entitled to our dreams. But maybe finding your calling is not quite so simple. We all want to begin with ability, with what we can do. But when we One, have you ever been a good judge of what you are capable of? People are always doing things that amaze themselves. A calling goes beyond your abilities and calls into question your potential. And when the journey is complete, even you are surprised. Just because you can become an astronaut or a newspaper delivery man does not mean you should. Each person is responsible to not only do what she is capable of, but also what she is meant to do. In other words, of author and activist 𝕮𝖆𝖕𝖙, don't just tell your life what you want to do with it. Listen to what it wants to do with you. Here is how it works, practically. Look at the major events in your life. Write them down on a piece of paper. Note everything significant you can remember. Even the things that seem silly or irrelevant but come to mind for some reason. Don't try to decode the meaning. Just put down everything you can think of. As you reach the end of the list, look for a common thread, some recurring theme. Can you see how one event without any intention or planning on your part influenced another? How that late night trip to the dinner led to meeting the love of your life? How a series of useless internships influence your career choice? You will begin to see a theme, a surprisingly obvious thread that ties it all together. Will it be clear at first? Of course not. This is just the start, but there's less intrigue to this process than we think. Your life, though a mystery, is trying to tell you something. Are you listening? Nothing is wasted. At the point Mike Nolan became sick, Jody considered quitting her newly launched ministry of helping people write letters to their loved ones. It was a lot of work and often discouraging. After his death, she did give up for a while, grief-stricken and disappointed. She let go of the dream that had once captivated her imagination and filled her with hope. When she saw how one little workbook made a difference in the life of a dying woman, though Jody's dream was rekindled, in spite of the tragedies she had experienced. She would have to endure. The cost of not doing so was too great. She had seen it in the eyes of her stepdaughter, who would never know the comfort others might. The possibility of helping others avoid that pain was what kept Jody going. Good tea. God waits nothing. She told me during one of our phone conversations, recalling her 16-year career at IBM before she quit to help her husband grow his business and raise a family. All of it played a part in where she is today. During those years at IBM, Jody was in charge of giving performance reviews to employees. She would praise and affirm things she saw in people, even when delivering difficult feedback. I would always try to look below the surface, she recalled. She wanted to go beyond the typical "what have you done for me lately" conversation. To me, it was an obvious thing that you would do for people, but then I realized how rare it was. Through hard workshops and speaking engagements, Jody helps people see things in the people they love that they would otherwise struggle to express. She is, in effect, using the gift of affirmation she learned at IBM. After my 7 years of working at a nonprofit, I can relate. Nothing is wasted. No job, no task, no obstacle is useless. If we are willing to see how it can fit into our calling, at times I felt frustrated at having to do a certain task or answer yet another email. It felt like I was being held back. But now I realize the truth. There isn't a day that goes by when I don't use some skill learned during those 7 years. It was all preparation for what has to come. As you explore your own calling, you will be surprised by how your precious experiences are conspiring to lead you in the direction of your life's walk. You just have to listen. Listening to your life begins with doing what none of us wants to do, with what Larry Elliott chose to do and Mike Nolan didn't do. You have to imagine your own death. When your time comes, what will you regret not doing? What will you wish you had more time to do? And what will have seemed trivial? Think of what you fear losing. Those are the things that matter most. One way to deepen this awareness is to watch other people, pay attention to those who love their lives and see what they do. What do they have that you don't? We can learn a lot from what initially looks like envy, namely what you are missing. You might have to see someone else love their life before you can love your own. Love, after all, is what holds this all together. What sustains a calling, one nothing as well. This is not petty jealousy, not if we take it one step further and do something with those feelings. In a way, we must become children again, watching and listening to others, mimicking the behavior we admire so that we can grow. Observing everyday examples of those who did not compromise their calling, but persevered through difficulties will inspire you to press on. When in doubt, commit. I hope it's clear by now that this is not a passive process. You must commit to the path, and that won't always be easy. In our world today, we have a commitment problem. Everywhere you look, it seems you can find a lack of commitment or follow-through. Leaders shirk responsibilities, politicians blame the other party, and many drift from one job to the next, never fully committing to any of them. On some level, we all struggle to commit to the work necessary to find our purpose. We are used to trying something out for 6 months to maybe a few years, then moving on. But a vocation is not like that. It's not something you try, it's something you become. When you do this, when you don't give yourself fully to the work you were born to do, you do the war and are yourself at the service. Commitment is necessary. It teaches us to exchange instant gratification for long-term reward and shows us that some change takes time. In learning this discipline of staying the course, our character grows. This is the payoff of patience, the joy of watching something grow that wouldn't have been had you not spent all those years sticking with it. But it's not just about commitment. It's also about perseverance. You can't find your passion if you don't push through pain. That's what I learned from Jody Noland and what Viktor Frankl's research revealed. Discovery comes with dedication. We must seek to understand our suffering with a redemptive worldview, choosing to see the greater good in spite of the evil in this world. Otherwise, the challenges we encounter will threaten to consume us, leaving us to live to lives of cynicism and regret. We can't get caught up in the magic of what might have been. We must move forward, pressing on when the hard times come. There will be, of course, failure, but with that come lessons to be learned. At times, you may commit to the wrong thing, which is fine, because it's better than alternative nothing. Committing to the wrong thing is better than standing still. Another strategy, and a popular one, is to not commit to anything. To hold out for better options, wait until the last minute, move relentlessly, restlessly from one thing to the next, and never commit to anything that could trap you. It feels like freedom, but is in fact just another cage. When you are surrounded with unlimited opportunities, inaction seems like the safe choice, paralyzed by fear. Many choose just that, to not move, to settle. Whether it's a job as a barista or a promising position on a corporate ladder, we take it. Because the alternative, a costly journey of discovery, is too scary to consider. Here's the truth. The risk of not committing is greater than the cost of making the wrong choice. Because when you fail, you learn. But what happens when you don't commit? When you choose to not act? Well, nothing. When you pause without intent, when you stalls you to fear, you don't learn a thing. Each wrong choice grows your character and strengthens your resilience, readying you for what comes next. Failure is a friend dressed up like an enemy. Let's be honest though. Despite the promises of self-help literature, failing is tough. It can hurt. Picking yourself up off the ground, one rejection after another, gets difficult after a while. But if we learn to endure, choosing to see the hidden balm in the wounds of failure, we can grow from our mistakes. We can overcome our obstacles and turn tragedy into triumph. We may even be able to celebrate those setbacks and trials, the things that once seemed so daunting, knowing they are all signs that we are on our way. Damn, this chapter is really long. Allow me to take 5 seconds. The nail in Walt Disney's boot. What Walt Disney did his best to not ask his parents for much. Elias and Flora Disney raised a frugal family in the Midwest, first as failed farmers and later as struggling business owners. But when he spotted a pair of leather boots with metal toes, young Walt had to have them. They were a practical gift, he reasoned, and would help it with his job of delivering newspaper, especially when it snowed. In a rare instance of indulgence, his parents caved. That year at Christmas, lying beneath the tree, was a pair of leather boots waiting for Walt. He wore them every day and could often be seen tramping around downtown Kansas City in them, as any proud kid with a new prized possession would do. He also kept his promise, wearing them morning and night to deliver the paper. One spring day, just after finishing his route, Walt crossed the street to join some friends at the local soda fountain. As he did, he noticed a piece of ice lying in the middle of the street and couldn't resist the temptation to kick it. As Walt's foot collided with the block of ice, something sharp struck his boot, and a surge of pain raced up the boy's leg. Looking down to see a horseshoe nail sticking out of his boot, he screamed. The nail had penetrated the leather exterior and drove straight into his big toe, freezing his foot fast to block of ice. For 20 minutes, Walt cried for help. He screamed, but no one came. Finally, a wagon driver stopped and came to his aid, chipping away at the ice and taking him to the doctor. After removing the nail with a pair of pliers and administering a tetanus shot, a doctor sent Walt home without any painkillers. He would be bedridden for 2 weeks. During the days that ensued, young Walt Disney had a lot to consider, including what he might do with the rest of his life. At 16 years old, a boy growing up in the early 20th century didn't have much time left to become a man. College was out of the question, given the Disney's lack of means. He would not be a lawyer or a doctor, even if his parents did have many. Walt's poor grades and inability to concentrate in school would have done him in. His prospects were limited. Would he follow his father's footsteps or forge his own path as his elder brother Ry had done? The break from his regular routine allowed Walt to imagine the possibility. During those 2 weeks, he must have thought about many things. Perhaps he thought about his friendship with schoolmate Walter Pfeiffer, whose family had introduced him to the magic of the theater. Maybe he thought about how much he loved drawing and amusing classmates with cartoons. He may have thought of the time he and his sister Ruth were left home alone to discover a barrel of tar outside. Walt said it would make for excellent paint, but his sister protested. After he assured her it would come off, the two proceeded to decorate the side of the house with pictures of houses and black zigzags. It never came off. We don't know what Walt was thinking during those 2 weeks in bed, but what we do know, according to biographer Bob Thomas, is that by the time his foot healed, he returned to delivering papers. He had decided to become a cartoonist. What was once a diversion was now a destiny. He needed something to disrupt his comfort, something painful to make him realize what was important. It wasn't the nail was good, it was just the means that forced him to listen. And as painful as it was, it worked. At times, we all need moments that force us to wake up, that command our attention. Those moments have been one we least expect, whether we want to or not. Our job isn't to wait for them or wonder why they occurred, but rather to see the opportunity they provide. Walt Disney used an injury to think about what he wanted to do when he grew up. In her grief, Jody Nolan recognized a chance, maybe even a responsibility, to give others comfort. When Eric Miller stopped wondering why his 5-year-old son got brain cancer and decided to make the most of every moment, his life and the lives of those around him were changed. As you avail yourself to how your life may be speaking, you too must decide. Will you wallow in regret, wondering why such a thing has befallen you? Or will you choose to act, making the most of your obstacle and allow it to evolve into an opportunity? Listening is where finding your calling starts, but it's not where it ends. Our ears can only take us so far before our hands have to do the rest of the walk. And that is for chapter 1. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you all of you for subscribing. And this is Daniel. I will be posting another chapter. So please follow, like, subscribe, share with your friends and your loved ones who might need these stories. Bye-bye.